What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to JY's Adventures. In this video we got how to beat the Goblins in Goblin Slayer, a crazy anime when it first aired, by the way, and this is by How to Beat Anime. Got some requests in my comment section. I really appreciate it, guys. I really appreciate all the support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Really appreciate all of you guys, man. Let's just hop right into it, y'all.
This video has been sponsored by Honkai Impact 3rd.
If your family was killed by horrifying goblins, what would you do? They took everything from you, and now they're about to destroy everything you love again, unless you stop them. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the goblins in Goblin Slayer. This priestess girl signs up to become a new adventurer, right as she meets this group of young explorers, who are also looking for another member to add to their party. And this guy tells priestess girl that they're about to go on a hunt for goblins who've kidnapped some girls from the town. Only one tiny problem. They're all porcelain ranked, which is the lowest rank that an adventurer can be, and this reception girl knows they're about to get slaughtered. But the ever-eager priestess girl accepts their invitation and the hunt begins. The gang enters this eerie cave, and priestess girl begins to get too scared for her own good, and this guy reassures her that goblins are nothing to be afraid of, and he knocks his sword on the roof of the cave. And our priestess girl even finds out that this gang lacked the money to buy any extra equipment before they agreed to go on this quest, meaning they're going on a hunt without any extra gear, right as she hears and sees a horde of terrifying goblins jump out from behind them. Oh, these guys failed so spectacularly, it's disgusting. And it was obvious from the get-go that they came into this with their hopes and dreams leading them rather than practicality, and this will get them killed. The problem is this, that in spite of their notorious reputation, most people think of goblins as insignificant pests that can be easily dealt with, but this couldn't be further from the truth. But let's say we take the goblins out of the equation completely. This group started off on the wrong foot. It was beyond apparent once that dude bumped his sword on the ceiling of that cave entrance, and that was no coincidence. The weapon he appears to be using is a longsword, and was characterized as having a cruciform hilt with a grip for two-handed use. And it was characterized not so much by the longer blade, but by the longer grip, and it was more prominently used as a weapon for mounted or fully armored knights, as in people fully suited up, meant to be fighting in wide open fields. This kid, he failed his group. He did not take into account his surroundings. His group is going into a cave, where the tunnels are not always going to be big enough for him to use a two-handed weapon. The chances of him not being able to use his full skill set with a two-handed weapon go way up. The chances of his sword getting stuck go way up. This kid is an idiot. He should have picked a much shorter sword. They failed to plan for this goblin.
That's why Goblin Slayer got a smaller sword.
Quest. They did not get to know their enemy to the point where they clearly knew that going too far deep into the caves where the goblins have home field advantage is a bad idea. They should have stayed closer to the surface near the entrance and lure the goblins out one by one. They should have used other means, such as smoking them out, because the goblins have the nasty habit of attacking in great numbers, and it's going to cost them big. The terrifying goblins start attacking the gang in a frenzy, right as this wizard chick starts blasting spells, only to get overrun by the goblins and stabbed good. And this dude is even more useless than we thought, taking pot shots until he fumbles his sword and gets brutally killed, with this other chick faring even worse and gets preyed upon by a goblin. It's a horrifying sight, and all hope is lost when suddenly priestess girl and the goblins hear incoming footsteps of something or someone, revealing himself to be the silver-ranked adventurer, Goblin Slayer himself. And he orders priest girl to use her holy light before he messes everyone up, killing goblins more efficiently than a suit-torn Peter Parker, burning this cave and killing the shaman goblin leader himself, eventually saving this one adventurer girl, and even killing the baby goblins of this horrifying nest, showing us just how merciless this guy really is. Goblin Slayer then even mentions that goblins should never be underestimated, especially ones being led by a shaman like this guy, or by a goblin lord. The next day, Priestess Girl meets Goblin Slayer again at the town center, and they get their next quest, involving goblins, of course. And might as well, as countless adventurers disregard goblins, thinking them to be nothing more but a pest problem. A quest only meant for beginners and amateurs. Later on, Goblin Slayer and Priestess Girl reach the next goblin nest, a sinister-looking ingrown tree trunk housing goblins within, and Priestess Girl readies some fire arrows for her silver-ranked superior, and he fires them with everything he's got, causing a massive fire to surge from within the goblin base. And he suddenly orders Priestess Girl to cast a spell to trap all the goblins inside the nest, burning them alive. This shocks Priestess Girl, who sees how automatic and emotionless Goblin Slayer is to all of this, telling her to keep her guard in case any of these goblins manage to escape somehow. No goblin is to remain alive. Okay, this Priestess Girl needs to stop feeling sorry for nature's worst mistake. Goblins like to dwell on frontier lands, untouched by military forces, and they have the tendency to prey on small villages and raise terror on folks that cannot defend themselves. And because the goblin species is an entirely male group, tell me, how do you think they get down to the business of being able to reproduce? That's right. Which is why some of the greatest crimes from goblins can range from serial mass breedings with the females of other species to mass murder. Even leaving a single child goblin alive can come back to bite you, because these vindictive little bastards like to hold grudges and can rapidly grow into adult states, which can make them into an enemy that you would never want to mess with. The thing that makes this breed so treacherous is that they always hunt in mass numbers. Despite their inability to be super smart, they aren't dumbasses either, and will eventually learn whatever it is that you throw at them, which is why maintaining a distance and striking first and hard with no mercy is the best strategy that this group could have planned for. What I would worry about in the future would be in regards to Priestess Girl, and her ability to maintain a high level of endurance when it comes to casting and retaining the presence of spells by sheer will. Because from the looks of things here, it seems as though she hesitated when ordered by Goblin Slayer to cast that spell, and it's obvious that she lacks practical experience. I would worry about how she'll handle things next time her adrenaline spikes and we're in critical danger. I would make her practice all her spells in her arsenal till she pukes the moment we got back to the village, because while we might be with the goblin expert, their ability to overwhelm us by sheer numbers cannot be ignored, which means the next time we're out, Priestess Girl must not choke under the pressure. But you know what won't cost them their lives while out on the hunt? Honkai Impact 3rd! This time bringing to you the latest and greatest 5.5 version to the captains, which already started, by the way, back on February 24th. Server. Joining in will reward you with down below, and thank you Honkai Impact 3rd for sponsoring this video. The dawn of a new day arrives, and in comes a party of 3, featuring this elf girl who we'll call Legolas Chick, or Orlando Bloom for short. I'm kidding. Legolas Chick then tells the receptionist that she's looking for a famous adventurer named Orc Bolg. The receptionist has no idea what the hell she's talking about, and neither does she know what Dwarf Guy over here is talking about either. Just then, Lizard Guy mentions that they're looking for the one known as Goblin Slayer right as he appears from behind them. They then tell him that they have a new mission request for the man himself. In this conference room, they mention that due to a growing number of demons in the capital, thanks to the resurrection of a famous demon king, a horrifying battle will soon take place between them and the rest of the world. But while the elves and the rest of the world's species prepare for this great battle, an increasing number of goblins have started becoming more and more active everywhere, making the preparations for this battle against the demons impossible. However, this group of adventurers have found one active goblin's nest responsible for all of this, which is why they need someone who knows goblins. And so Goblin Slayer accepts the job, not knowing that this time around, it'll cost him everything he has, including the lives of his pals, if he's not careful enough. Later on in the night, the adventurers share a meal with each other and begin familiarizing themselves with one another, all of their strengths and weaknesses.
That was smart.
Okay, hold up. We need to talk about the additional members of our party, because unlike the first goblin hunting group that we met that got obliterated by goblins, this time around, we seem to have some real potential within this group. Lizard Guy is a cleric, which means he can use magic along with conventional weaponry and can cast up to 4 spells a day. with the spells ranging from summoning warriors from the undead to making weapons appear out of thin air, performing healing spells, using magic to increase his own strength, and possesses the ability to rust any equipment rapidly, and can even produce the sound of a dragon's mighty roar. But the thing about this character is that we finally have a powerful partner that can aid us in performing brute force attacks in the form of getting up close to goblins. And unlike Priestess Girl, this guy doesn't need to rely on his magic in order to kick some serious ass. Legolas Chick is another serious addition to our squad because she's an elf. She's over 2,000 years old and she knows how to use a bow and arrow, which means we now have the ability of ranged attacks against the goblins. Because unlike Goblin Slayer's ranged attacks, this elf has the ability to fire arrows in curved paths. She can change the trajectory of her arrows and she can fire multiple arrows simultaneously with extreme proficiency. Now Dwarf Guy is a shaman, which means he can also aid us in casting spells, up to 4 a day. Those abilities do require a catalyst in order to function, such as casting wine into the air in a fine mist, enough to cause anyone who breathes it in to become incredibly drunk and non-functioning. And because of this, he also has a bag of spells up his sleeve. This group provides us with a range of possibilities with how we'll be able to tackle the goblins, from relying on Priestess Girl to provide us with healing and shielding cover, to using Lizard Guy as backup if we need to defeat the goblins quickly and with brute force, along with using Legolas Chick to provide us with tactical ranged cover, thanks to her ability to control the trajectory of her arrows. And hell, even Dwarf Guy with his clumsy spell casting will still prove to be useful, since we can use his odd spells as method of distractions against the goblins, in case we ever need to surprise them from behind. Needless to say, we've got some talent this time in this goblin hunting roster. The burgeoning blossom of a new day begins, and the sun ascends over this goblin nest entrance, just as these vicious monsters get shot down by Legolas Chick, emptying the area of the monsters. And the group of adventurers prepare to enter what might as well be Goblin Hell itself. Slowly but surely, the group combs through the corridors of these sinister-looking catacomb-like structures, right before Legolas Chick spots a trap right in front of the group. But Goblin Slayer notes that this is strange, since unlike before, there are no totems in sight, meaning there's no shaman around, and ordinary goblins would never be able to set traps. This means there's something much more sinister leading the goblins down here. Little do they realize just how right they are. Dwarf Guy then recognizes the tracks as the group prepares to take down the horrors that await them, and they enter an atrium-like room holding dozens of sleeping goblins. But this Goblin Slayer is one crafty son of a gun, and prepares the group with his plan of attack, starting with Dwarf Guy and Priestess Girl combining their spells to create a sleeping spell more powerful than even 2 downed bottles of tequila, allowing the gang to put these goblins to sleep for good. However, suddenly the gang feels a blasting wind erupt from a dark entranceway, forcing the group to take notice of the impending, bellowing footsteps approaching them fast. It's something big, and something far more powerful and bigger than any goblin anyone has ever slayed before. It's an ogre. Okay, this group is royally screwed. Aside from his massive structure and brute strength, this guy can regenerate minor wounds inflicted upon him by swords and other sharp weapons, and has the ability to cast a massive fireball, and this means that one spell casted from him and we're dead. Which means we need to take out his ranged attack first and foremost, or more specifically, the method by which he summons his spell, i.e. his mouth. If I'm Goblin Slayer, I need to use the entirety of my group's strengths in order to pull this off. Option 1. The entire group attacks and distracts the ogre, while Legolas Chick fires fire arrows into the eyes and mouth of the ogre, ideally blinding him and severely burning the inside of his mouth and esophagus. I would then have the group retreat and utilize ranged attacks before going into close-quarter combat to take the ogre down. Option 2. I would have Dwarf Guy summon a fear spell, which is a spell used to control a goblin's emotions. However, in this instance, I would order him to use this spell to call out a swarm of locusts to distract the ogre, as he has done this before with this spell in the past. This in of itself won't stop the ogre, but it would buy us enough time to not get wrecked by the ogre's fireball, time in which I would order Priestess Girl to use her spell of purification, which is a spell to remove the impurities from people and items. This, when performed on a living being, could in theory turn their blood into water, and I'm pretty darn sure that an ogre's blood is not that clean, which which would in turn kill the ogre. Now, this last part is highly risky, which is why beforehand I would have Priestess Girl try out as many different ways that she can utilize her spells. Because if she screws up on this plan, then we're all dead. If I was Goblin Slayer, a contingency plan that I would have in case Priestess Girl didn't have the balls or the skills to be able to go through it, would be to make use of Lizard Guy's partial dragon spell, which would enhance his strength and speed greatly. And I would have Goblin Slayer personally down a bottle of stamina potion, which the group does carry. I would then utilize both his and Lizard Guy's attacks to come at the ogre in an omnidirectional fashion and simply cut him down where he stands, since we'd both be effectively on magical steroids, all the while having synchronized attacks from the rest of the group. This horrifying ogre isn't playing games and creates this giant, pulsating fireball. Right at the same time, Priestess Girl conjures up a magic wall, protecting the gang, but the spell from the ogre exhausts Priestess Girl fast, allowing him to land a blow to Goblin Slayer's face in an instant, knocking him down hard, forcing Priestess Girl to tend to his aid, granting him the quick strength to whip out one of his scrolls right before this ogre prepares to obliterate him with another fireball, until suddenly Goblin Slayer cuts him down with a magical gate scroll linked to the bottom of the sea, unleashing the menacing pressure of the deepest parts of the ocean, causing the water to unleash at a terrifying speed and tears this ogre apart, taking out one more ungodly creature from this earth. Later on, elsewhere, deep beneath the town's sewers, these two rookie adventurers try fighting these ginormous, terrifying rats, but this dude gets his sword stuck within the corpse of one of the rats, and this other wizard girl isn't of much help, forcing them to abandon the quest entirely, which means no pay, and they've just lost their own weapons. And so, flat broke, they end up sulking all the way back to the town center, and decide to ask an expert for their help on how to slay the menacing overgrown rats hiding beneath the sewers. So they decide to ask Goblin Slayer himself, who tells them to use a club, as they're easier to find for free. And so now, loaded up on weaponry, the duo heads back down into the depths of the town's sewage system and run right back into these unstoppable rats. However, this time, beating these things isn't the main concern, as they just have run into an army of disgusting Godzilla-like cockroaches, forcing them to run for their sweet lives. Okay, this is the absolute stankiest situation I would never want to be in. And worst of all, we've just crossed paths with nature's nastiest little villain, the cockroach. Though at the very least in our world, we don't have to go up against those steroid-abusing cockroaches from terraformers, which means we still have a chance. Now, we don't know what year this takes place in, but it's clear from the decor that we're definitely back in medieval times. And if that's the case in those days, let's just say the world hasn't worked out the cleanest way to treat their sewage waste, with some parts of sewage tunnels back then even containing enough methane and chlorine from buildup of waste to be highly flammable and incredibly toxic. Though from the looks of that lit candle, it makes me think that the concentration level of gas present down in those tunnels is not high enough yet, at least for us to use to our advantage. And those stupid kids, of course, came down into this hellhole completely unprepared, which means I think we've got only one more move in our pockets. This girl is an apprentice cleric, which means she's kind of like Priestess Girl but way less cool. And as a result, she's only got one spell, a bolt of lightning that she can use, but the thing is, she's just a rookie, which means I wouldn't trust her with a ranged attack if that attacker was 2 feet away from her, and so because of this, we really only have one option, which would be to make her shoot a massive bolt of lightning up towards the roof of that sewage system, causing the entire thing to collapse, separating us from those things completely. Now, I know it's a gamble, but it's safe to say that the sewage system isn't up to code as ones in the modern day, and well, we really don't have many other options here, so it's time to take some risks. Using a combined method of throwing the lit lantern and using wizardry, the duo burn and stun the cockroaches enough to knock them on their backs before slaughtering them, unknowingly preparing them for an upcoming battle that will test everything they have, along with Goblin Slayer soon enough. Back at the town center, Goblin Slayer finds a request from someone from a far distant land that specifically asked for him. Someone none other than the Archbishop of the Supreme God, the Sword Maiden herself, a legendary gold-ranked adventurer who 10 years ago defeated the Demon Lord herself. So Goblin Slayer, along with his gang, sets out for Watertown, an idyllic town.
And when I say bodied, different type of body.
With a much more sinister problem dwelling beneath the city's surface. And to top off the bad news, Legolas chick and priestess girl make Goblin Slayer promise to not use any water torture, nor fire, nor poison against their soon-to-be goblin victims. Just as the gang reaches the town, and more specifically, the Temple of Law itself, where Sword Maiden tells the group of adventurers that about a month ago, an assistant of the temple was brutally murdered late at night while out on an errand, with her corpse sliced right open while she was still alive, and that attacks on women and abductions on children have begun to increase ever since then. The Sword Maiden then tells them that they've discovered the culprit behind all of this. Not a man, but a goblin. And since this town was built upon another town, there's no doubt that where they're hiding is beneath the town's surface, deep underground. And because of the demons raiding the capital, the military is spread too thin to help, which means it's up to Goblin Slayer and crew to take them out. Supplied with an old map from Sword Maiden, the gang plunges deep beneath the Earth's surface, and sure enough encounter a horde of terrifying goblins right from the get-go, and quickly cut them up just like a bad boy chef at Benihana. But something is up, as there's just too many goblins to handle, with this boat charging down the sewer Nile full of flesh-hungry goblins coming right for this group's throat, forcing the gang to work together. Priestess girl then uses her spell as a shield, just as Goblin Slayer throws a blinding smoke bomb right before him and Lizard Guy rain hell upon these green goblins. Dwarf Guy here then drops a giant rock on top of the boat, sinking the ship along with the goblins all the way down to the bottom. But they're not out of the woods yet, because just then this horrifying reptilian beast pops out of the water and surprises the hell out of the group, forcing everybody to run. Okay, we are in serious trouble here, because this swamp dragon doesn't look like it's a vegan. Now realistically, this swamp dragon is no different than a plain old alligator, which is why we could use what we know about these sneaky swamp dwellers to our advantage, because face to face we can't really think about taking him head on, as its overwhelming structure would likely be too much for us to handle in the moment. However, the one thing that we can take on is its head, literally, because the snout of an alligator is covered in sensitive receptors to make its snout and obviously eyes the most vulnerable points on its body. And this is where our little dwarf friend can finally pull his weight, because he's exactly who we need for this scenario. Unfortunately though, casting spells takes a few seconds, which means we'll need to give Dwarf Guy some time, enough in which he'll be able to cast his spell, which is why I would order Lizard Guy to throw Dwarf Guy ahead of us as we run, like an American football, which will clear Dwarf Guy of the monster and give him at least 4 to 5 seconds of time before we catch up to him again, giving him enough time within that time frame to conjure up a stone blast spell, creating some rocks and making them grow as big as hell before firing them in rapid succession towards the alligator's snout and eyes, distracting him enough to wean him off of us completely, or give us enough time to get away from him within that hallway, because we don't need to defeat him, we just need to get him off of our tail. The group runs like mad, barely escaping with their lives, but Goblin Slayer has a trick up his sleeve, just as he spots a goblin ship near them, making Priestess Girl whip up a magic light, distracting the goblins long enough until this swamp dragon pops up and devours them whole. But the horrors aren't over yet, because Goblin Slayer knows that goblins don't know how to use boats, which means that someone taught them this skill. And if the goblins were here long, they would have known about that swamp dragon and wouldn't have dared using any boats, which means someone or something brought all those goblins here recently and on purpose. The next day, the group heads back deep underground to find the leader behind all of these goblins. And this time, Goblin Slayer brings along his newest pet, a canary, a bird designed to panic at even the slightest hint of poison gas being used within the area, because these goblins seem more than intelligent enough to handle using such deadly tools. Just then, they cautiously enter a room where they find something horrifying, a prisoner chained down and unconscious. But Goblin Slayer isn't fooled, and makes them realize that it's a setup right before the door behind them suddenly closes shut. Poison gas then begins flowing out from within the walls of the room, having the group cornered like rats. Goblin Slayer then hands the group a bit of charcoal and tells them to wrap this in cloth and around their face, as this will protect them from the poison within the air. He then demands that the group mix 2 bags of quicklime and volcanic earth together to form concrete and to block the holes with, beast. But Goblin Slayer knows that it won't be long before an army of goblins comes crashing through those doors. And he's right, because all of a sudden, a loud bang erupts just outside, and a horde of goblin beasts try barging in through the door, and the group readies themselves for the most brutal fight of their life. But the news keeps on getting worse, because Legolas Chick then hears the incoming footsteps of something much larger in size than the rest of the goblins. Just then, the biggest green beast you've ever seen in your life rips right through the door, and its piercing mandibles crave human flesh. It's a horrifying goblin champion, and the group prepares for the most terrifying fight of their entire lives. Okay, this is insane. This is a horrifying beast. It's a goblin champion, a variant of goblins considered to be a hero among the goblin race, and it's much larger both in mass and equipment than regular goblins. Now, while they may be capable fighters, there is a way that this group can take this goblin champion head on, and that will be to fight dirty. This is a battle between life and death, and playing nice isn't going to give us any extra chances at winning. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to focus on two parts of the goblin champion's body parts, namely the Achilles tendon and the popliteal fossa. Now, in basic anatomy, the Achilles tendon is what pulls on the heel and allows us to stand on our toes when walking, running, or jumping. However, if an Achilles tendon were to rupture, while the individual would be still able to walk, it would greatly reduce that person's ability to be mobile. Now, while the physiology of a goblin differs than that of humans, the way that gravity works on the goblin's joints, I think it's actually very similar. And it's a safe bet that if the group focuses on slicing the area where this goblin's Achilles tendon would be, this would greatly limit its ability to move. Secondly, following the rupture of where his Achilles tendon would be, I would also slice this goblin's popliteal fossa, which is the area in the back of the knee, an area containing important nerves and vessels passing from the thigh to the leg. Like I said, if we—
Hold on, y'all, this is some science, bro. Some biology for y'all. Hold on.
The area containing important nerves and vessels passing from the thigh to the leg. Like I said, if we cut the area where this goblin's popliteal fossa would be, even if he doesn't have one, I'm pretty sure that thanks to gravity, this goblin would feel the sudden painful weight of his entire body, and that very large body would come crashing down hard. Because we literally just took out two very important parts of his legs that he kinda needs to stand on. Utilizing what we know of basic anatomy, this will allow us to at least immobilize this goblin champion and possibly get it on the floor, this way giving us the choice of either running for our lives or taking this goblin champion down. The gang puts on a courageous and desperate fight against the goblins, but it's no use, cause this goblin champion is too horrifyingly awesome at what it does, which is to kill, awarding Goblin Slayer with more than a few bloodied bruises and sickening blows to Goblin Slayer's face, shocking Priestess Girl into accidentally turning off her magic force field, letting all the goblins in, and allowing this goblin champion to take a bite right out of her sweet flesh. But shockingly, out of nowhere, Goblin Slayer surprisingly rises up and jumps right on top of the goblin champion, pouring every ounce of his remaining will into his final act, choking the shit out of the goblin champion with some human hair, eventually killing him and sending the rest of the goblins away scared shitless for their lives. Thankfully, Priestess Girl and Goblin Slayer managed to barely make it out alive. The next day, the gang then goes to check on a now rested Goblin Slayer before the group recovers from the trauma of that battle and fill their bellies with some food and get new equipment. And the gang prepares themselves to go down again into those horrifying sewers. Because this time, Lizard Guy tells the group that he's found something within the sewers even more menacing than a goblin champion, and something far more strange. This creature of chaos, using its eye to unleash the power of disintegration, melting anything that it looks at in mere seconds. Though,
when I saw this, it reminded me of Legend of Zelda. You know, like when you're in the tower with just the eyeball that shoot lasers?
To unleash the power of disintegration, melting anything that it looks at in mere seconds. Though, it won't attack unless provoked, and won't attack them unless they enter the room. Okay, this guy's a whole new character, and we don't know much about it. But what we do know is what it's capable of. Aside from creating an extremely hot beam of energy that can disintegrate anything in its path, it can also dispel any active spells made within its effective range, meaning our spells within its range will not work. However, like like we just found out, it won't attack us if we don't enter the room. Now in this instance, I think the best thing we can do is to use some good old-fashioned weaponry to take this beast out, since he'll be able to dispel any spell we throw at him. But in this case, I have to say, what's the rush? The gang is acting like they're on the clock, when in reality there's no need to rush at all. No enemies are nearby as of yet, which is why I argue that this group should take their sweet time in planning out their next move. I'd even use this time to head back up to the town service to procure some explosives from the town's armory, draping a sock over said explosive and attaching a fuse to it. Now, if we had trouble getting any such fuse around town, then we could simply make our own by pouring 36 grams of potassium nitrate along with 24 grams of plain sugar into a cup, and thereby creating a 60-gram composition that is then to be shaken up vigorously, mixing both particles together, after which we would add 1/3 cup of water into a medium-high heat frying pan, quickly boiling the water before adding the composition into the mix as well, and making sure to stir the mixture until it dissolves completely before adding a batch of 100% cotton yarn string into the pan, making sure to let this string soak up all the composition thoroughly before laying it out to dry on a pan sheet, speeding this process along by putting it in an oven or whatever equivalent they have available for about 20 minutes before taking it out to cool for another 10. Now, with a slow burning fuse that we have in spades, next we'd simply need to form some axle grease or rubber solution equivalent to whatever they have within that.
Y'all just saw how to make a slow burning fuse. Yeah, yo, you know it'd be great videos like actually going watching the how to beat videos and then actually going out and you doing everything they said, like to test it, you know what I'm saying, making sure it's legit or not, because that is crazy stuff.
It out to cool for another 10. Now, with a slow burning fuse that we have in spades, next we'd simply need to form some axle grease or rubber solution equivalent to whatever they have within that town to seal the sock with, and they could even seal it off with hot wax. And all of this is what will essentially create a makeshift sticky bomb. From here, I'd bring a whole carton of these bad boys back down with me and simply camp out and hurl these things at this eyeball monster, likely in quick succession, ideally sticking our explosives onto its sweet face and then going boom. Now, if that doesn't work and we need a distraction to keep its fiery gaze from melting us as we throw our bombs, then one of us could simply run around the eyeball monster in the other direction while we throw our makeshift bombs like a Major League Pro, and voila, eyeball monster is taken care of. You're welcome. The gang is at a loss for tactics, but Goblin Slayer has a trick up his sleeve. Using Legolas Chick to distract the monster's gaze, Dwarf Guy comes from behind to use a sleeping spell on this horrifying eyeball monster, giving Goblin Slayer enough time to open up a big bag of flour and throw it right into the air, right before Lizard Guy summons a monster to head inside the room, re-alerting the now awakened eyeball monster into unleashing his fire stare, until suddenly a massive explosion erupts, lighting the whole room ablaze, forcing Priestess Girl to shield off the room for the group's protection. After the fireworks, the gang counts their blessings, right before they realize what this mirror really is. It's a portal to an army of goblins. This is how they arrived into the underground sewers of the city, but they don't have time to react because just then, Legolas Chick hears a swarm of goblins headed straight for them, and so the gang quickly sets up a defensive position before they are attacked by more horrifying goblins, including the same goblin champion back from the dead. This scares the shit out of everybody. Lizard Guy takes down the mirror on the orders of Goblin Slayer, and the group takes cover under it, preparing for Dwarf Guy and Priestess Girl's massive spell blast, casting an eruption across the entire underground base, destroying the mirror and killing every last goblin with it. Later, Goblin Slayer confronts Sword Maiden herself and finds out that she actually knew about the goblins being underground the whole time, and she basically tells Goblin Slayer that since she got violated by goblins as a teenager, she was too traumatized to defeat them herself, and wanted the public to realize just how awful goblins really are. Oh, and she totally has a hardcore crush on our boy, but he's too focused on
she wanted to smash
goblins really are. Oh, and she totally has a hardcore crush on our boy, but he's too focused on goblins to give a damn idiot. The next day, the gang gets word that the demon lord in the capital has been defeated. However, many of his armies still remain active, including armies of goblins spread out across the land that could show up at any minute. Goblin Slayer later in the day stumbles upon the most horrifying thing, something that will shock everyone in this village to their core. Hundreds of goblin footprints just outside the village. village. Goblin Slayer then runs home back to where he's been resting to tell this chick that he's been shacking up with, in a very PG sort of way, to run, because these tracks of goblin footprints are not like anything he's ever seen before, and it suggests that this army of goblins definitely has a leader, not a shaman or a goblin champion, but a goblin lord, and that the attack will come tonight or tomorrow at dawn, meaning any outside help from the military won't be able to come in time, which means that this village is all that stands in its way, and the village is entirely on its own. The Goblin Slayer then runs into the town center to warn all the adventurers that goblins are about to attack this village and that everybody should join in on the fight, and he begs for their help. Unfortunately for him though, everybody thinks he's a bona fide weirdo, choosing to always be quiet and stoic and to only take on goblin jobs. This is why they instead resist his pleas for help, opting to let him handle this mess alone instead. Okay, this is a huge deal, because if we thought ogres and goblin champions were a big deal enough, then a goblin lord is beyond terrifying, because unlike other goblins, who are for the most part wild and irrational beasts, a goblin lord is the only known rational goblin capable of leadership and plotting. Unlike their brethren, they've evolved to be capable of thought and high intelligence, and is a foe that we cannot take lightly. They are master tacticians, expert swordsmen, and excel in leadership positions, which means if you take his skills combined with the accelerated growth that goblins naturally have, this means that we have a massive army of goblins headed by a military genius more capable than most humans are. While Goblin Slayer spent years training to fight goblins, he didn't spend time learning arguably one of the most important skills that anyone could learn in life, which is social skills. Being charismatic around people can be vital too. While some people don't think that this will work, however, being charismatic will draw people to you like a magnet and make them more willing to support you and your endeavors, all simply because they like you. But right now, Goblin Slayer is looked up as a non-sociable weirdo by everyone in this room, which means if we're him, we need to quickly act fast in order to convince these folks of our hiding debonair charm, because no one will want to help us otherwise. Now, while we can't fix others' perceived impressions of us, we can try the act of humility and lessen ourselves in front of everyone else, because so far everyone thinks that the reason we only hunt goblins is that we think we're too good for any other type of enemy, and they don't even believe that we deserve to be silver ranked through goblin slaying alone, which means the first thing we need to correct is this perceived image of ourselves by addressing it head on. I would start by addressing and revealing the reason as to why we've only been hunting goblins all this while, telling the whole room of our traumatic past involving goblins and the death of our sister at the hands of a goblin when we were a child. I'm pretty darn certain by showing a little bit of humility and revealing the why as to how we came to be, that we will be able to gain the sympathy of everyone here, and ideally gaining the respect or pity in order to lend a helping hand. Now, if this didn't work, then I would also talk to the receptionist girl to see if she would be able to create a makeshift quest for us, offering up a reward to all those who decide to battle the army of goblins, because you've seen the way she's been eyeing our Goblin Slayer throughout the entire season. We're pretty darn sure that she will help him. Suddenly, this douchebag in red earrings finally warms up to Goblin Slayer's pleas, and the Town Center Adventuring Guild also offers up a reward for the goblins, 1 gold for every goblin slain. And this definitely gets everyone else's mouth salivating at that thought, as the whole faction of adventurers finally get in on the action, listening to Goblin Slayer's plans of attack, readying the group for the most intense fight of their lives. The night arrives, and the goblins eerily sneak through the grasslands in the distance, leaving human prisoners out in the open field, firstly to lure in the humans, forcing the adventurers to quickly rescue the hostages right before the army of goblins comes in charging in droves, erupting into a majestic battle of attrition, with blood spilled left and right, as man and goblin wrestle it out with their lives on the line. Goblins riding on wolves and the world's finest top adventurers duking it out on the plain grasslands, and elven arrows perforate the air in the thousands, causing more chaos to befall on this town than anyone has ever experienced before. Just then, a bunch of goblin champions come in running to test the utmost strength of the guild's best silver-ranked adventurers. The surprising amount of resistance and strength from within the town starts to threaten the Goblin Lord, who way back in the distance begins to retreat, knowing that if he can escape, then the goblins will live another day. But too bad for him. Goblin Slayer already knows all of his moves, and he greets him head on, ready to kill.
You an op and you trying to run away, fam? We don't let the ops get away.
Slayer already knows all of his moves,
We in
and
the
he greets him
streets.
head
We in the
on,
streets
ready
for
to
real.
kill him. And Goblin Slayer walks up to the Goblin Lord himself, and the two engage in close combat to the death. The two
Fight
then
up.
charge at each
All
other
out
joust
fight.
style and swing blade for blade until our man critically injures the Goblin Lord, pissing him off to the bone, unleashing something within him that comes charging right back at Goblin Slayer, slicing his arm and knocking him down hard. And the Goblin Lord walks up to the Slayer of Goblins. The Goblin Lord begins stepping on our hero's face like a game of Dance Dance Revolution, and he readies his axe to kill the Goblin Slayer until his body freezes up. It's Priestess Girl, and she casts a spell trapping the Goblin Lord within a magical wall-like structure. Trapping
Coming
being
in
good,
clutch,
the Goblin Lord
Priestess
uses his
Girl.
intelligence and
Let's
cunningness
go.
to articulate in plain English to please be spared. However, this time, Priestess Girl isn't a
know what's
pushover
up.
and lets Goblin Slayer
She knows
stab
what's
the
up.
Goblin Lord in the face, and our hero passes out. But thankfully, his balls are bigger than those that watch our anime channel. I'm kidding. And he manages to get back up and head back to the town center to a cheering group of adventurers who
No cap, I don't even see that as a diss. Like dead ass. Y'all think y'all would fight all these goblins alone? He only recently got help, you know what I'm saying, when we found him.
and he manages to get back up and head back to the town center to a cheering group of adventurers who dine and drink the night away, celebrating the town's safety and the money that they've all just earned. And they also celebrate the safe
go.
return of the Goblin Slayer himself,
W's.
living yet
W's.
another day to take on a new
W's.
adventure involving goblins again.
And if you want to join us on our next Goblin Hunt, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist down below.
Hey, shout out to How to Beat Anime, y'all. That was a great video. Thank y'all so much for the request, man. That was a banger of a video. I remember watching Goblin Slayer. It was a crazy show, you know what I'm saying? I remember there was a season 2 was supposed to come around, but I never was there a season 2? I don't think there ever was, but if it came back, I'd definitely, you know, watch it right away. Great video from How to Beat Anime, guys. Let me know what was your favorite part of the video. Let me know what you thought of my reaction. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Comment multiple times for the algorithm. Leave some reaction requests below. Thank y'all so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.